The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the luxurious lobby of the Grand Marist Hotel. Sarah stood near the large windows, looking out, lost in thought. It was the kind of evening where the sky melted from gold to deep blue, but she felt none of its beauty. She was waiting for someone she wasn't sure she wanted to see. She had thought about canceling their meeting, but a part of her still wanted to confront him. The memory of their last conversation was fresh in her mind. Something about it had rattled her, and now, standing there, she felt a mix of anger and uncertainty. He had asked her for something she couldn't give, and she had denied his request. That refusal echoed in her mind. She had thought it was a clear boundary, a line he could not cross. But now, seeing that familiar space around her, she wondered, had she done the right thing? As she waited, her gaze fell upon a bellhop moving swiftly through the lobby, dressed sharply in a dark suit and red tie. He seemed to glide rather than walk. Sarah smiled slightly, admiring his confidence. A flash of movement caught her eye as the heavy doors swung open. Walking in was none other than David. His presence instantly changed the atmosphere. He was everything she remembered: charming, tall, with an easy smile that could convince anyone of his sincerity. But today his charm felt wrapped in a layer of tension. "Sarah," he said, his voice smooth yet tinged with urgency. She nodded, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. He stepped closer, lowering his voice as if the world around them mattered a little less in that moment. They both glanced at the bellhop, who was busy assisting another guest. Sarah felt her heartbeat quicken. The memories flooded back, the argument they had, the accusations thrown like daggers, her denial of his last request. The embarrassment of that moment still lingered like a bitter taste in her mouth. "David," she said, choosing her words carefully, "what happened is complicated." He interrupted, a hint of frustration creeping into his tone. "It seems quite straightforward to me. You said no." She swallowed hard, forcing herself to look him in the eye. "It was not the right thing, David." Before he could respond, the bellhop returned, carrying a tray of drinks. "Good evening, sir," he said, addressing David with effortless respect. "I have your drinks here." The word "sir" echoed in the lobby like a distant bell. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. There was something in the way the bellhop addressed him that shifted the ground beneath her. David stood a bit taller, a confident smile easing onto his face. It was a name, a title, that seemed to change everything. It made her reconsider the man standing in front of her. She felt small all of a sudden, caught in a storm of emotions. For all of his charm, David held a presence that was commanding. It wasn't just about his looks or his charisma. There was authority in the way he spoke and moved, and it sent a ripple of confusion through Sarah. She focused on the way the bellhop bowed slightly as he set the drinks down, like David belonged here in this grand lobby, a king among commoners. "I appreciate it," David replied, barely looking at the bellhop, but the cordial response seemed to deepen whatever tension hung in the air between them. Sarah gulped, trying to shake off the impact of that simple address. He asked, a layer of sarcasm creeping into his voice. "Like I belong here? That's not what I mean," she rushed to clarify, her voice rising slightly. David frowned. "You're reading into things too much." But even as he said it, a glimmer of something flickered in his eyes. Perhaps it was arrogance, perhaps it was insecurity. Either way, it raised questions that churned in Sarah's mind. "Let's just focus on what really matters," she said, taking a deep breath. "I denied your request because I felt pressured." He leaned closer, his expression earnest, yet there was a faint hint of a smile. "You think I was trying to pressure you?" Her heart raced. How could he say that? Hadn't she already been living life on the edge, trying to break free from expectations? That was precisely why she had said no. It was an offer, yes, but it felt like a chain. David's brow furrowed. "You see, Sarah, that's the difference. I don't live by the chains that bind most people. I break them." She shot back, feeling the heat rise in her cheeks. "This isn't just a game. Your life." He laughed then, that familiar laugh that melted hearts and built bridges, except now it felt like a flickering flame in the wind. "You mean the life you live under the watchful eyes of your parents, doing what they ask, following their plans." His words cut deeper than she'd expected. She stepped back slightly, a tremor running through her. He repeated, and for a moment the bellhop stood frozen nearby, sensing the tension churn around them. David's eyes locked onto hers. "Fair would be choosing your own path, taking a risk." Sarah felt her pulse race, not from fear, but from that challenge ringing in the air. "I want to be bold," she whispered, more to herself than to him. He leaned even closer, voice low and teasing, a flame beguiling her with warmth. "You need to make a choice." The bellhop cleared his throat, and Sarah's gaze darted toward him with a sense of urgency. He could probably read the intensity of the situation, but he kept his cool demeanor. For a moment, Sarah watched the bellhop, feeling almost detached. She thought of his role, the way he moved between people, always ready to serve, cloaked in respect. And in that moment, David stood not as a man she knew, but as a figure surrounded by authority. "No, thank you," David replied, but the way he dismissed the bellhop felt contemptuous. Sarah felt a pang of discomfort. Was this who he was? She paused, searching for the right words. He raised an eyebrow, the tension shifting. "Yes," she insisted, feeling the need to press forward. "You've leaned into this charade of power, but it all feels hollow." For several electric moments, they stood together, the air heavy with words unspoken, emotions raw. David folded his arms, a fracture appearing in his confident facade. He asked, softening his tone. No, before she could finish, he leaned closer, determination etched on his face. What if this is me? At that moment she hesitated. Was it him standing here, or was it the title, the authority he slipped into, dressed as sharply as the bellhop, the man who walked through life with the power of a king? David, I don't want to love a title, I want to love. His expression shifted, a brief glimpse of vulnerability flickering in his eyes. The bellhop returned, busily adjusting his tie and glancing between them like a spectator in a dizzying play. Excuse me, sir, leave it, David snapped, irritation creeping into his controlled exterior. Sarah felt a surge of indignation. You don't own him, she said boldly, surprising even herself. The words tumbled out before she could catch them. Sarah, please, no, David. The bellhop stood frozen, caught in the crossfire of their emotions. His eyes were wide, not wanting to overstep, but aware of the moment heated before him. Some people need to be told what to do, David finally said, his eyes darting toward the bellhop and back to her. She pressed. The lobby quieted for a moment, only the soft hum of conversations happening elsewhere echoing in the background. David's face shifted from anger to a strange calm, like the eye of a storm. Maybe I'm just tired of living in shadows. Maybe I want to feel something real, he said, the confidence slipping from his voice. But you make me doubt it. Tears stung Sarah's eyes. Suddenly the illusion of power crumbled like sand. David, I never wanted to make you feel that way. She struggled with the words. The bellhop moved away, sensing the shift. Sarah almost reached out to stop him, but stayed where she was, knowing they were the characters in this fading scene. It's not about what you want, it's about what we want, David replied quietly, voice barely a whisper now. We don't want the same things, she said, trembling. As he took a step back, the realization hit both of them simultaneously. They were two figures on different paths, running parallel yet apart. The words they hadn't said hung in the air, heavy like unspoken promises. The quiet understanding shifted between them, a bridge forged in vulnerability, yet still the distance remained. Sarah, he said softly, heart exposed. They searched each other's eyes, the heavy uncertainty thick and noticeable. And in that moment the bellhop returned, sweeping in with a burst of life, unaware of the storm they had just weathered. David nodded, a small smile, the mask returning briefly. But Sarah saw the flicker of something else, vulnerability hiding beneath the surface. No, thank you, she said, feeling the weight of her own voice again. She took a deep breath. As she walked away, Sarah felt a rush of emotions swirl within her. She noticed the bellhop lingering, a silent observer. She didn't notice how David reacted, but she could sense that even in the simplest words, they were forever changed. This was the end of a chapter, but within the lobby's walls, under the soft lighting and between the echoes of conversations, she knew that their paths would cross again. They had opened the door, and sometimes all it took was a single push to walk through it, whether to light or shadow. The weight of the world faded, but the understanding lingered just the same. The moment the bellhop walked into the room and addressed David as Sir, Sarah felt as if the air had been sucked from her lungs. It was a simple word, but the weight behind it shifted everything. The plush surroundings of the Grand Marist Hotel faded, and for a heartbeat, she could only focus on the way David straightened up, an almost imperceptible smile pushing at the corners of his mouth. The bellhop asked, his tone professional but bouncing with an energy that suggested he had seen this man play out his charade many times before. David basked in that title. For Sarah, it was like opening a book and finding the words scrambled, the plot unraveling in a chaotic twist. She had denied him less than an hour ago. She thought that refusal would uphold her independence. But now, standing in this luxurious suite, she felt small and inexplicably trapped. Just some water, thank you, David replied, leaning back slightly, his hands resting casually where they might suggest authority. As the bellhop moved away, Sarah's heart raced. Was this how he saw himself? A man commanding respect, a man others had to cater to, David asked, turning back to her. His voice held a hint of mockery, but also a serious edge. I want to be a part of my own life, she countered, her fists clenching by her side. His confident demeanor slipped slightly as he looked at her, frustration flickering in his eyes. You think saying no gives you freedom? I could give you everything you've wanted. Scared, a flash of anger ignited within her. She had fought her whole life against chains that had threatened to bind her. Freedom was everything, and here he was, presenting what he called an opportunity, but it felt more like a cage. I can't be what you want, he argued passionately, stepping closer, lowering his voice. In that moment, their eyes locked, and time felt still. It should have been charged with electricity, but instead it felt more like a battlefield. Because shaking it off isn't liberation if it just leads to a different kind of control, she replied, her voice steady now. I have my dreams, my plans, he scoffed, but Sarah could see that he was struggling with her words. You think my world is all suits and ties, it's the freedom to choose. Freedom is not a title, she interrupted. For a fleeting moment, vulnerability crossed his face, softening his hard edges. And choosing to stay in your little bubble is going to get you nowhere, he said softly. The tension in the room built thick and charged. The opulence of the suite surrounded them like a cocoon, but it felt more like a prison. Sarah felt overwhelmed by the silent weight of the environment, the plush carpet, the ornate furniture, and the lavish decor that whispered of money and status. Here, everything shouted sophistication, yet here she was, fighting for her own identity. David stepped back, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "You want to deny what you could have," she countered. "That doesn't feel like an opportunity." He opened his mouth to reply, but before he could, a knock echoed off the door. The bellhop stepped in, perfectly timed. The formality in his demeanor was a sharp contrast to the turbulence between them. David's posture shifted again as he turned back toward the bellhop, and Sarah noticed that slight change, the subtle way he took on that authoritative presence. "Thank you," David nodded, taking the glass and dismissing the bellhop with a wave of his hand. As the boy retreated, Sarah felt a twist in her stomach. David was wearing a mask of confidence, one that seemed to dull the vulnerability he had just briefly shown her. "This is the part where you say you want it all, Sarah," he pressed, his eyes narrowing. "You can have it if you just let go." She felt the anger bubbling up again. "It's not fear." He stepped closer again, his voice lowered to a near whisper laced with intensity. Clarity or self-imposed cage. With each moment that stretched between them, she could feel a whirlwind of emotions swirling. Was he right? Had she twisted clarity into a cage for herself? But the battle within her was raging. She didn't want to hate that truth, but what he described didn't feel real. It felt like letting go of herself. "Imagine everything we could build," he urged. She shot back. The words hit like a striking blow. His eyes darkened for a moment, as if he understood what she meant on a deeper level than just the surface fight between them. David let out a shaky breath, stepping back slightly as if recoiling from her sudden clarity. But the moment hung heavy, and as the silence filled the space, she wanted to scream and run all at once. The tension seeped into her, crawling through her veins like molten lava. It was fierce and uncontainable. "Maybe you could see me for who I really am," he said, lowering his voice. "I'm not just some guy in a suit. Or maybe you need to see that what you're offering isn't what I want," she said, feeling bold in her conviction. His eyes flashed, a complexity swirling within them. "It's not safety, it's strength," she protested. "I see you as scared," he shot back, frustration spilling over. Just then the bellhop reappeared, this time with a stack of towels, chosen so carefully out from a display in the suite. "Excuse me, sir." Sarah felt the air shift again as the bellhop brought attention back to David. The way he addressed him with that casual authority made something twist in her stomach. It was as if the bellhop fueled the image, a backdrop of grandeur that enhanced the disconnect she felt. She wasn't just arguing with David, but with the entire system he represented. "Thank you," David replied, accepting the towels without so much as a glance at Sarah. She felt invisible again, as if their earlier confrontation had deflated into nothingness. The bellhop placed the towels on the counter, smiling warmly before turning to leave, but Sarah felt a flood of emotion push forward. In that moment, she glanced sideways at David. She said quietly as the door clicked closed behind the bellhop, his brow furrowed, and she could see the flicker of confusion. "You thrive in this world of glamour and sirs, but underneath all of it." The words were bold as they slipped from her lips, surprising even herself. David's expression changed again, something softer breaking through the front he maintained. "I never said I wasn't human," he confessed, running a hand over his face. She pushed harder. His silence hung heavy in the air as he looked away, the carefully constructed facade of confidence cracking. The moment hung between them like a frail thread. "You think so little of me," he whispered, pain edged in his voice. "No." In that instant, vulnerability washed over David, rippling through the air. "Maybe I don't even know who I am anymore," he admitted, breath hitching. The room felt quieter. It was as if the very walls listened, held their breath. Sarah felt the tension ease slightly, replaced by understanding. He looked up, eyes shimmering. "I don't know," he said finally, the confidence all but stripped away. "I can't just throw it all away." Her heart twisted as she stepped forward. "And if I can't be a part of that life, David, the truth. You'll find you're losing yourself by holding on to what you believe is strength," he said, extending a hand toward her, that glimmer of vulnerability lingering. Sarah paused, staring at his outstretched hand, and in that moment visions of a different path flashed before her eyes. She thought of the possibilities and dreams she'd always held close, the endless plans she'd made. Choosing the path before her might mean stepping outside her comfort zone, or perhaps even shattering the illusions she'd held. But could she bear the cost? Could she accept being part of his world? It wasn't just about David. It was about her desires, her journey, and her own need for identity. His eyes met hers in an unspoken challenge, the echo of the bellhop's "sir" still hanging in the air, thick and heavy. "I can't promise I'll fit into that world, but I can promise to explore it," she said finally, feeling a weight lift, yet a new burden settling in its place. David's relief was palpable as his shoulders relaxed. As their gazes locked, Sarah felt an undeniable current flow between them, charged with possibility. Maybe there was more to this journey than she had thought. Maybe there was a way to bridge their worlds, to find a path that allowed both of them to be true to themselves, regardless of titles or expectations. They stood there on the precipice of something new, both terrified and excited about what awaited beyond their carefully drawn lines. With the shadows of the sun settling outside, the light of hope flickered in the dim corners of the room, illuminating a potential they hadn't dared to embrace. The luxurious suite at the Grand Marist Hotel was an oasis of opulence, but the tension inside was thick enough to slice with a knife. Sarah stood at the window, her breath caught somewhere between disbelief and anger. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows, a perfect backdrop to the struggle unfolding. Moments ago, she had denied David's request, her heart racing as she defended her boundaries. Now it felt like the ground beneath her was shifting. "Please just think about it," David said, his voice a silk thread of persuasion as he stepped closer, trying to close the distance that felt wider than a chasm now. She could sense the tension radiating from him. It mixed with the warmth of the sunset filtering through the glass, creating an almost surreal atmosphere. "No," she replied firmly, shaking her head. Her voice trembled slightly, revealing the struggle underneath her resolve. He pressed, his eyes searching hers for doubt, for hesitation. But before she could respond, there was a knock on the door, breaking the charged moment. Sarah turned around, ready to be interrupted by another guest, but it was the bellhop. He stepped in, a silhouette in a crisp uniform, radiating an easy confidence that starkly contrasted with the tumult in the room. "Good evening, sir," he said, addressing David. The word "sir" seemed to hang in the air like an incantation, shifting everything between them. It wasn't merely a title, it was a signal, a declaration of status that made Sarah gasp in surprise. David straightened almost instinctively, a glimmer of pride sliding across his features. "Thank you," he replied, a subtle smile taking shape as he accepted the tray the bellhop presented. He had transformed from a man pleading with her into someone powerful, commanding, and suddenly, Sarah felt small. "Your drinks, sir," the bellhop continued, oblivious to the electricity sparking between the two. He offered a slight nod and stepped back, the door closing softly behind him. For a moment, the air felt charged and Sarah's heart raced. She inhaled deeply, trying to regain some sense of control. The very word "sir" now echoed in her mind like a haunting refrain. How had this argument become about titles? She said, her voice catching slightly. David took a sip from the glass the bellhop had placed on the table, unfazed by her question. He replied, a trace of amusement in his tone. "I work hard for my position. Responsibility to what?" "To maintain an image, Sarah," he said slowly, trying to rein in her frustration. "You don't understand the kind of work it takes to build a life that others respect." Her mind spun as the realization hit her. David was not just a man standing before her. He was carrying the world on his shoulders, and she wanted to dismantle it with a few well-placed words. She challenged, stepping forward. His eyes darkened with emotion, and for a moment he was stripped bare before her, vulnerable yet fierce. "You're not a villain," she admitted softly. He interrupted, raising his voice. "You want me to throw it all away for what? To be comfortable?" "No, David, that's not what I want," she replied fiercely, her pulse racing. He scoffed but couldn't fully mask the flicker of uncertainty that crossed his face. She shot back, frustration poking holes in his confident exterior. With every sharp word exchanged, the tension became practically tangible. It felt like they were dancing on the brink of something profound, a chasm that might swallow them both if they weren't careful. "Trust me, Sarah," he said, stepping closer, the heat radiating off of him. "You would understand if you had spent even a moment in my shoes." "Choosing your path shouldn't mean losing yourself along the way," she countered, her voice steady but filled with passion. David frowned, and it was clear he was grappling with something. The very foundations of their argument were crumbling, revealing his internal conflict. "I thought you were different," he finally said, his voice low. "Wanting more doesn't mean adopting someone else's identity," she said, feeling her resolve sharpen like steel forged in fire. Just as the silence settled between them, the bellhop's voice rang out again as he slipped back into the room, this time with a couple of freshly pressed napkins. He asked, casting a quick glance toward Sarah, his eyes darting with curiosity. David straightened again, wearing his mask like the king he was expected to be. "No, thank you," he replied curtly, his gaze shifting back toward Sarah, the moment of vulnerability dissipating like mist in sunlight. It was maddening how quickly he could change, how effortlessly he slipped back into that role. And here she was, standing strong amidst the shifting sands, worried about losing her grip. "You can't keep running away from this, David," she said slowly, trying to regain that earlier connection. He offered a half laugh, yet the sound was tinged with bitterness. "Then let me help you," she insisted, feeling desperate to reach him. He paused, the flicker of doubt in his eyes returning, but before he could respond, the bellhop stood there, a specter observing the unraveling tension. "Sir," he said gently, his eyes shifting back to David. With that single word, "sir," it was as if they were pulled back into the chasm. David's back straightened again, the aura of authority washing over him. "No, thank you," he replied, almost dismissively. The bellhop nodded and stepped back, his expression lingering in the air like an uninvited guest. The air between them grew thick again as Sarah watched the weight return to David's shoulders. It was as if he traded vulnerability for the mask, and she felt helpless to stop it. David said, turning back to her, a thin smile forming. Even he can see it. She felt frustration bubbling inside her. She gestured angrily toward the door. "You're more than just a title," he shouted, his voice echoing off the ornate walls, cutting the tension like a knife. She cried out passionately, feeling her heart race with the weight of truth. "I know that living behind walls of expectations gets you nowhere. Maybe you should just walk away then," he said, the hurt in his eyes undeniable. With those words, the dam inside her broke. "I'm unhappy watching you lose yourself. You're this brilliant, passionate person who doesn't need to hide behind, sir." The echo of her emotions hung in the air, a raging storm surging through them both. The silence stretched, filled with the unspoken implications of what was happening between them. David stepped closer, confusion flaring in his eyes. "And what if I don't want to change?" she exclaimed, the raw energy of her words bursting from her. The tension hung heavy, thick enough you could almost taste it. David looked at her as if searching for something buried deep within, something he'd lost along the way. Just then the bellhop returned again, but this time he paused at the threshold between them, sensing the storm swirling. "Sir," he started hesitantly, casting a glance towards Sarah. "Everything is fine," David replied curtly, yet she could hear the cracks in his voice. It was as if the bellhop had momentarily shattered the illusion of confidence he wrapped around himself. "Fine isn't the same as okay," she interjected. The bellhop watched, unsure of his role in this personal turmoil, caught between being professional and wanting to leave the unsteady atmosphere. David shifted, the lines on his face showing something new: confusion, fear, frustration mingling into one complicated blend of emotions. "I don't know if you understand how hard this is," he finally breathed, lowering his gaze. "Then let me help you find your way," she pleaded, feeling an urgent need to reach him. He met her eyes again, and for a moment it felt like he was on the precipice of allowing the truth in. He asked softly, pain creeping into his tone. "Then I won't turn away, I promise," she said, grounding herself in honesty. "I want to see all of you, even the broken pieces." And just as those words settled between them, she saw the fracture splintering his mask. The facade of control, strength, and indifference began to crumble, and for the first time he looked at her with raw emotions, a desperation that spoke volumes. "Fine," he finally said, the strength in his voice wavering. "You want to see?" With his words, it felt like they both stood at an edge, ready to leap into a new reality together, ready to search for something genuine. The bellhop watched, his presence a silent acknowledgement of the change in the air. "Thank you," Sarah whispered, feeling a warmth wash over her, grounding them both in honesty. And in the glow of the sunset, something beautiful began to surge between them, a chance to take back what had been lost, to reclaim their true selves under the weight of expectations and betrayal. No more titles, no more masks, just the raw essence of who they truly were. The moment Sarah stepped into the lavish lobby of the Grand Marist Hotel, she felt the air shift around her. It was as if the atmosphere itself held its breath, waiting for what was to come. Her heart raced, palms slightly clammy against the silk of her dress. Tonight was supposed to be an important meeting, a moment of decision, and there he was, David, standing by the grand fireplace, the flickering flames illuminating his intense gaze. "Sarah," he called, his voice smooth yet laced with urgency. It was the kind of voice that made heads turn, the kind that commanded attention. She walked over, trying to steady her pulse. But the weight of their last conversation still hung in the air, thick and suffocating. She asked, her tone cautious. "It's more than that," he began, crossing his arms, a nervous habit of his. Her breath caught. The offer was the very reason she had agreed to meet. He wanted her to join him in a risky business venture, a leap into the unknown that she wasn't sure she could take. Did he really think a few days would change her mind? The stakes were too high, and she valued her independence more than any potential financial gain. He pressed, stepping closer. "This could change everything for you, for us. Everything you want doesn't fit into my life," she shot back, the frustration rising in her voice. A flicker of hurt crossed his face, but he quickly masked it with determination. "The old way of doing things is gone, Sarah. We need to adapt," she countered, feeling the tension pulse between them like an electric current. Just as the words hung between them, a bellhop with a crisp uniform strolled by, carrying a tray of drinks. He paused, politely waiting for their attention. "Good evening, sir," he said, turning to David. That single word, "sir," released a ripple of energy into the room. David straightened up, as if the title wrapped around him like a warm cloak. Sarah gasped, the implications of that simple word sweeping through her. In that moment, David became not just David, the man she had known and loved, but a figure cloaked in authority and power. It was as if the bellhop's acknowledgement transformed him into something more than human, a representation of the very world that was pulling him away from her. "Thank you," he replied, accepting the drinks with an air of confidence that sent shivers down her spine. The bellhop nodded and moved on, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. Watching David embrace that title while she felt more invisible only fueled the fire that burned inside her. How could he not see what this was doing to them? She asked, her voice thick with indignation. The question felt volatile but necessary. He looked at her surprised. "Because it matters to me, you're letting some title define you," Sarah insisted, anger bubbling beneath her surface. David softened for just a moment, the mask slipping. "And what do you want me to be?" Just another person with no ambition, she demanded. The lobby felt smaller, the elegant decor closing in around them. Their argument echoed in the space, bouncing off the marble floors and towering ceilings. Sarah felt exposed, every emotion laid bare as she fought for what she believed in. She was no longer just fighting for herself, she was fighting for the man in front of her, the man she loved, even if he was slowly slipping away. I can't just give it all up, he argued, frustration curling in his tone. You make it sound so easy, Sarah. It wouldn't be walking away, she cried. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken truths and shattered dreams. David's expression turned desperate, the strength in his resolve wavering. For just a moment, she could see the cracks in his armor, the swirling emotions that lay just beneath the surface. But even as Sarah reached out, wanting to bridge that gap between them, something held him back. I'm trying to create a life where we can flourish, he said, voice quiet now. Where I can provide for us both, she insisted. I don't want a life built on someone else's terms. He opened his mouth to protest, but the weight of her words hung there, pressing down, heavy and unyielding. Just then the bellhop returned, this time with a notepad and a pen. Excuse me, sir. He asked, glancing between the two of them. David took a breath, the mask sliding back into place. No, thank you, he replied, a touch too coolly this time. The bellhop nodded and stepped back, sensing the tension still rippling through the air. David's confidence returned, a shield against her penetrating gaze. Sarah didn't back down. Maybe if you'd come on board, it would include you, she insisted, anger and fear blazing together. The challenge in his voice sliced through the room like a knife. At that moment, she felt as if the ground had shifted beneath her feet, and she struggled not to lose her balance. She exclaimed, fire lighting up her words. Her body was rigid with tension. David stared at her, a mix of emotions swirling in his gaze. The honesty in his question was palpable. Yes, an unsettling silence ensued, but before either could respond, the bellhop re-entered the room. This time he paused, clearly sensing the heat that filled the space. He cleared his throat, glancing sideways at David. David seemed to thaw slightly at the polite interruption. Thank you, he said, but the tension remained festering beneath the surface. She couldn't help but interject, the bitterness tasting like bile as she locked her gaze on David. Stop it, he snapped, losing patience. She shot back, her voice rising. His hand clenched around the drink he held, and for a moment the tension roared louder than words. Sarah felt a storm brewing inside her, and she couldn't tell if it was anger or heartbreak. David finally said, the mask slipping to reveal his raw frustration. This is how the world works, why not? The silence stretched thin, and it felt like they were both standing at the edge of a cliff, daring one another to jump. Because I don't know who that is anymore, he admitted, each word heavy with vulnerability. I've been so busy chasing success that I forgot what it means to be human. And just like that, the vulnerability seeped into the cracks of the room, turning the tension into something more profound. Sarah caught her breath, her heart aching for him. In the silence that followed, everything around them faded. It was just the two of them, and the weight of their unspoken words hung thick in the air. I want to help you find that person, she whispered, reaching out for him. David blinked slowly, as if her words had carved a path through the fog surrounding him. We can face it together, she offered softly. You don't have to hide behind Sir or anyone else. They shared a moment of understanding, that fragile connection threading through their hearts. David stepped closer, the earlier bravado slipping away, revealing raw honesty in its place. Maybe I have been hiding, he admitted quietly, his gaze earnest. Just then the bellhop reappeared, but the atmosphere felt different now. He stood by the door, sensing the change. Is there anything else, sir? David nodded slowly, a subtle smile creeping onto his face. No, thank you, he replied, but this time his voice held a softer edge. As the bellhop nodded and walked away, Sarah shared a glance with David that said more than words ever could. In that moment, they stood at the precipice of transformation. They had confronted the difficult truth, the raw emotion that made them both human, and it felt liberating. Let's have dinner, David said finally, a hint of warmth returning in his voice. And we can talk more about, she asked, a flicker of hope igniting in her chest. Yes, together, no titles. In the middle of the opulent setting that could have felt so distant and cold, they began to carve out a path that included both of them. No pretenses, no masks. The warmth between them grew, a promise painted in vulnerability. And as they walked side by side, the storm that once brewed between them began to settle, leaving only the tender embrace of possibility in its wake. The air was thick with tension as Sarah stood at the entrance of the Grand Marist Hotel. She was dressed in a deep blue gown that flowed elegantly, yet the anticipation twisted her stomach in knots. Her heart raced, echoing the pounding music from the bar nearby. Tonight was meant to be special, but now it felt like a storm brewing just beneath the surface. Her eyes locked onto David, who leaned casually against the polished marble reception desk. He looked confident, almost regal, with his shirt meticulously pressed and his hair perfectly styled. She couldn't deny that he exuded charm, but there was something more, something that made her uneasy. His voice cut through the chaos, smooth and inviting. Every inch of him radiated control, and yet she felt a growing distance between them. He gestured toward a quiet corner, away from the whispers and laughter surrounding them. As they walked, David's expression shifted from charming to serious. "I really need you to reconsider," he said once they found a relatively private spot. "I see the potential," Sarah replied sharply, her heart pounding as she spoke. "That's what scares me." His brow furrowed slightly. "It is personal. I wouldn't ask if I didn't believe in both of us." She took a breath, trying to calm the storm raging within her. "I can't drop my life to follow your dream." He stepped closer, his eyes pleading, but there was an intensity in his gaze that made her pulse race. "Selfish? You call this selfish when I'm offering you a chance to break free from the mundane?" Sarah shook her head, feeling the frustration building. "This is not what I signed up for." Before David could respond, a bellhop slipped between them, carrying a tray of drinks. The bellhop addressed David with a casual yet respectful nod, that single word hanging in the air like a weight. "Thank you," David replied, straightening up, the title making him appear even more authoritative. For a heartbeat, Sarah felt her heart drop. That simple word, "sir," transformed the man she loved into someone else entirely. He became a figure clothed in power, and she felt small standing next to him. The bellhop, oblivious to their tension, poured the drinks and moved on without a second glance. She gasped, her voice low, barely able to contain the storm building inside her. "Do you enjoy being called sir?" David raised an eyebrow, but there was an edge of defensiveness in his tone. "Why does it matter?" she repeated, incredulous. "It feels like you're letting that title define you." He crossed his arms, frustration rising within him. "And what's wrong with wanting respect? Nothing, but losing yourself in the process." Her voice rose, echoing slightly in their private bubble. "You're not just a title, David. You're a person with dreams, with flaws, but I don't see you anymore." At that moment, the tension became palpable, swirling around them. "Maybe you don't understand what it's like," he shot back, pain tinged with anger. "You've never had to fight for every little thing. Fighting doesn't mean sacrificing your essence. You think wearing that title makes you deserving of respect, but all it does is hide the real you," she countered fiercely. The frustration bubbled to the surface, a tide of emotions that had been pent up for too long. His expression shifted, uncertainty flickering across his features. "Maybe I am hiding," he admitted reluctantly. Sarah hesitated. Just as David opened his mouth to respond, the bellhop returned with another tray. He said, voice steady. "I was instructed to bring you some snacks." David nodded, the title soothing his anxiety, a shield against vulnerability. As the bellhop placed the snacks on the table, Sarah felt a surge of anger. She pressed, her voice a low hiss. "To be called sir," David snapped, irritation flaring in his eyes. She shot back, her heart racing. "It's how you're allowing yourself to be seen and how you're letting that define you." He stepped back, jaw tightening, a torrent of emotions brewing. She could see the conflict within him, a struggle between the man he was and the version he had created in pursuit of success. "Maybe I don't want to listen to this," he said quietly, tension trailing edges on his words. Then he turned, taking a deep breath as he faced the bustling lobby. Her heart sank. "You're not walking away, not now," she insisted, each word laced with determination. "You have to confront this." Just then the bellhop returned, standing silently as if waiting for instructions. He asked David, oblivious to the emotional storm swirling around them. "Just leave us," David said curtly, frustration evident in his tone. The bellhop nodded respectfully and stepped back, his presence receding like a tide. "And there you go again," Sarah said, feeling the walls close in. "You let that title consume you, and you treat people who care about you like they're beneath you." David clenched his fists, visibly struggling to control his emotions. "You're acting like you know me, but you don't. No, but you've chosen it. You've chosen to elevate yourself at the expense of your humanity," she replied, her voice steady but wavering underneath the weight of her truth. For a moment he stood there, wrestling with his internal conflict, a flood of emotions crossing his features, each one battling for dominance. He finally whispered, vulnerability creeping into his posture. The vulnerable admission hung in the air and the tension shifted slightly. She felt a wave of empathy wash over her, but regret rushed in alongside it. He hesitated, the familiar mask crumbling slightly. "I've built this life to protect myself." "Safer but hollow," she pressed, her voice softer. "You can't let the fear of losing what you built keep you from becoming who you truly are." David's eyes flickered with doubt, but he remained silent. A moment passed and she could sense the weight of unspoken fears, unshed tears. "I don't want to lose you," he finally confessed, each word dripping with honesty. There was an ache in her heart, a swell of understanding. "Then allow yourself to be vulnerable with me," she urged, stepping closer. "Let the real you come out. You don't need to be sir around me." As he held her gaze, something began to shift. Perhaps it was the window of opportunity opening wider, the light breaking through the clouds of fear. Just then, the bellhop returned for what felt like the 100th time, though his expression was fraught with concern. David seemed to hesitate for a moment, the frustration flaring again. "You can leave us," he said, his tone gentler this time, almost apologetic. The bellhop nodded once more, clearly sensing the emotional weight in the room. With that, he stepped back, leaving them in solitude once again. "See, you can drop the act," Sarah said, catching her breath. David looked at her, the fight draining from his expression as he took a deep breath. "Maybe I'm scared of what comes next," she countered, feeling the conviction swell within her. "You have to trust the journey." He took a moment, absorbing her words. Slowly, he nodded. The warmth of understanding radiated between them, a flickering flame illuminating the shadows that had once engulfed their conversation. "I'm with you," she said softly, her heart fluttering with renewed hope. "We'll face whatever comes next together, no masks, no titles." For the first time in what felt like an eternity, David smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that lit up his face and softened his features. Perhaps it was the promise of honesty that transformed everything. They stood closer now, two souls on the same page, ready to step forward into an uncertain future, hand in hand. As they walked away from the chaos of the hotel lobby, the weight of expectation began to lift. No longer bound by the constraints of labels or titles, they had reclaimed their narrative, ready to face whatever came next together. The moment Sarah stepped into the Grand Marist Hotel, the opulence hit her like a wave. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above, casting shimmering reflections on the marble floor, while the soft hum of laughter and clinking glasses danced in the air. It was beautiful, but it made her stomach churn. Tonight felt monumental, yet the weight of uncertainty pressed down on her. She spotted David by the bar, his tall figure commanding and confident. He was chatting animatedly, laughter spilling from him like an overfilled glass, making everyone around him smile. It was the man she'd fallen for, charming, ambitious, and utterly captivating. But the more she observed, the deeper her unease grew. He was giving a performance. She called, forcing a smile as she approached him. The moment he saw her, his face lit up, but beneath that facade she saw flickers of something darker. He exclaimed, walking toward her with arms open wide. "You made it." "I almost didn't," she admitted, her heart pounding. "Sure," he replied, his voice lowering slightly. They moved to a cozy corner filled with plush seating, away from the rowdy crowd. The atmosphere seemed drenched in anticipation. When they settled in, Sarah felt a subtle shift in the air, an invisible barrier between them. This was the moment she had dreaded. "David, I want to talk about the proposal," Sarah began, her voice steady but unsure. He leaned in, eyes glimmering with excitement. "You mean the investment opportunity? This is huge, Sarah. Think about it." She hesitated, feeling the weight of his expectations. "It just feels risky." "Risk is a part of life." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration creeping into his voice. "You always play it safe, but what if this could change everything for both of us? And what if everything goes wrong?" She could see the determination in his eyes, but it didn't overshadow the trepidation swirling in her heart. He countered, leaning closer, intensity radiating off him. "You can't tell me you dream of a life that's just." She felt her pulse quicken. As the tension thickened, a bellhop glided past them, carrying a tray laden with drinks. He paused at their table, looking directly at David. "Good evening, sir," he said, the word sir hanging in the air like an anchor. Sarah's breath caught. There it was, a shift, a transformation. The moment the bellhop addressed him as sir, David's posture changed, exuding confidence and authority that made the space around him seem more powerful. "Thank you," David replied, straightening up slightly, allowing that title to settle comfortably over him. It was as if Sarah's heart dropped into her stomach. She could feel the walls of their conversation closing in around her. David felt different, distant, wrapped in this new persona. She asked, her voice quieter now, edged with confusion. He looked at her, bemusement flickering in his eyes. "It changes you," she said, urgency rising in her tone. "It's just a title," he shrugged, but in that moment she could see the flicker of something that suggested it was far more important to him than he let on. She echoed, incredulous. "Do you not see how it shapes you?" David frowned, frustration and anger flashing. "And how do you have the audacity to say that?" "I'm here trying to make something of myself, to be a provider." The confrontation hung thick in the air, and Sarah felt a whirlwind of emotions rising. There was love and urgency clashing with confusion and anger. She shot back, her voice trembling. "I'm here because I care." David ran a hand over his face, the moment of vulnerability slipping through his fingers. She could see it, the weight of expectation, the pressure to conform to a vision that didn't include her, and it scared her to death. He opened his mouth to respond, but the bellhop returned again, this time with a second tray. His eyes flickered to Sarah's, seemingly aware of the tension but careful not to overstep. "Thanks," David muttered, already pulling his attention back to her, but the comment still lingered in the air. Sarah pressed, desperation rising in her voice. "Even he gets it. You're allowing this title to take over your life." David shot her a look that could burn through ice. He exploded, the anger boiling over. "I've worked hard for this. No one's asking you to toss anything aside." Silence fell between them, thick and oppressive. The laughter and chatter of the crowd faded into a dull roar as they stood on the edge of something monumental. David opened his mouth, but no words came. She said, her voice breaking with emotion, "I want to be part of your life, but I need you to be real with me." "It's not that simple," he replied, his voice now softer, each word heavy with the weight of reality. When he said that, it felt like a dagger to her heart. His voice cracked, a hint of vulnerability escaping. At that moment it struck her, a realization that sent a ripple through the tension that surrounded them. "It's okay not to know," she said softly, her voice soothing, "but you don't have to wear this facade." His gaze locked onto hers, and she could see the hesitation reflected in his eyes, a stir of emotion that wanted to break free. As the moment stretched, the bellhop slipped away, sensing that the conversation had shifted, leaving them alone once again. "I want to know you, David," Sarah said slowly, determination stealing her resolve, "not just the man who has power or authority." "I'm scared," he admitted, fear rippling through the rawness of his confession. With those words, the tension coiled in a different way, loosening its grip. The mask he wore began to crack, revealing a vulnerability that had long been hidden. "Then let me help you," she replied gently, reaching out to grasp his hand. "We can find a way together where you don't have to define yourself solely by what you show to the world." As he processed her words, she could see something shift within him, a flicker of hope breaking through the chaos. "Maybe I don't want to be Sir anymore," he confessed, a soft vulnerability returning. "And I want you to be that man," she said, squeezing his hand. "Let's face this together." For a heartbeat, the world around them faded into silence. And in that moment of honesty, Sarah felt a warmth wash over her, a sense of clarity emerging in their shared vulnerability. The deeper connection had emerged from the ashes of their fears and arguments. They stood at the brink of something new, finally allowing themselves to embrace each other fully. "Maybe we can meet somewhere in the middle," he said softly, as their eyes met in a fragile embrace of possibility. "Together," she affirmed, feeling lighter, as if the weight of the world had begun to lift. As they shared a small smile, a sense of hope glimmered between them. In a world where titles seemed to matter most, they took a step back to reclaim their reality, to take back the control that had slipped through their fingers. The struggles and fears that had once threatened to tear them apart slowly faded, replaced with the understanding that they were strong enough to face the unknown side by side. And together they walked out of that hotel, hand in hand, no longer defined by the titles of others, but by the love they shared and the journey they would navigate together. They were ready to embrace the beautiful mess of life, the fear of losing titles behind them, but never the connection they had forged. The moment Sarah stepped into the lobby of the Grand Marist Hotel, she felt an electric charge in the air, both thrilling and intimidating. The lavish chandeliers above sparkled like distant stars, reflecting off the polished marble floors. It was magnificent but daunting, a world she wasn't sure she belonged to. As she scanned the room, her eyes landed on him, David, standing confidently by the bar, an easy smile on his face. He was so at home in this setting. She took a deep breath, her mind spinning with thoughts of their earlier conversation. This meeting was supposed to be a turning point, but the weight of uncertainty pressed down on her. What had once felt like a thrill now felt perilous. David called, waving her over. His smile made her heart race, but as she moved closer, doubt flickered in her mind. They had a lot to discuss, and she was scared of what might come. She asked, pulling him aside away from the crowd. "Of course, I was hoping we could chat about my proposal," he said, a glimmer of excitement lighting up his eyes. "Right, the proposal," she replied, her heart tightening. "David, can we be real for a second?" She hesitated, searching for the right words. He frowned, confusion painting his features. "What do you mean?" "I know, but it's too risky." Disappointment washed over him, but determination quickly replaced it. "You're playing it safe again, Sarah." His voice rose slightly, drawing the attention of nearby guests. "This isn't just a business decision for me, it feels deeply personal." David stepped closer, urgency written all over his face. "But don't you want more?" "More doesn't mean abandoning my principles," she countered, feeling a fire ignite within her. Just then a bellhop walked by, tray in hand, bustling with energy. He paused, looking directly at David. "Good evening, sir," he said, a casual authority in his tone. At that moment, Sarah felt a rush of emotions. The word "sir" struck her like lightning. David seemed to change, standing taller, exuding power and dominance. The transformation was unsettling. "Thank you," David replied, but Sarah barely heard him. Her heart dropped, a mix of awe and dread swirling inside her. In an instant, he was no longer just David, her partner. He was a figure cloaked in authority, and she felt small beside him. She blurted out, surprised by her own boldness. He looked at her, bewildered. "That title changes you. You become someone I don't recognize," she said, her voice quivering with urgency. "Don't be absurd, it's just a title," he replied, but there was a hint of defensiveness beneath his bravado. She pressed, inhaling sharply. "I see you getting lost in it. It makes you think you're above others." David's expression hardened, frustration etched on his face. "You think I want this? I've earned my place," she argued, desperation creeping into her voice. "I need to know the real you." The bellhop returned, unnoticed by both of them, ready to serve with a polite smile. He asked, directing his gaze toward David. David seemed to bask in the attention, fully slipping into that authoritative role. "No, thank you," he replied, a slight cockiness in his tone, and like that, Sarah's heart sank deeper. She felt invisible, like the walls around them were closing in, trapping her inside a moment she desperately wanted to change. "You don't even hear how you sound," she exclaimed. He stepped back, defensiveness returning. "This isn't fair." Cried, feeling the frustration boil over. "But I don't want to be part of a life that pulls you away from yourself." Silence enveloped them, thick and heavy. David opened his mouth, grappling for words, but confusion seemed to blind him. He finally whispered, almost to himself. She asserted, her heart aching for him. He hesitated, doubt creeping into his expression. She shot back, each word filled with urgency. Just then, the bellhop returned again, carrying an extra set of drinks. He asked hesitantly, sensing the charged atmosphere. David shot him a tight-lipped smile. "We're good." The bellhop nodded, silently slipping away, and as the distance grew between them, Sarah felt the tension linger. She pressed, her heart racing. This is about more than a title, it's about us, about who we are becoming. David's posture shifted, uncertainty flickering within him. "Maybe I don't want to face that," he murmured, a crack in his armor appearing. She urged, her voice filled with empathy. "Hiding from it won't protect you." He glanced down, his bravado crumbling. In that vulnerable moment, he resembled the man she fell in love with, the man she wanted to fight alongside, not against. "I've let this version of myself become my identity," he confessed, voice thick with emotion. Sarah felt her heart ache for him. "Then let's find that person together," she proposed softly, reaching out for his hand. As their eyes connected, an understanding blossomed, a flicker of hope igniting an uncharted path. Here they were just two people yearning for an authentic connection. He whispered, vulnerability dancing on the edges of his words. "Then we'll pick each other up. It's a journey," she replied, holding his gaze. The moment hung thick, their breaths mingling in the shared vulnerability. Then something shifted in David. The hardness in his demeanor softened, revealing a sense of relief. "Maybe I don't have to carry this alone," he said tentatively. "Trust is the foundation," she affirmed, squeezing his hand. Just then, the bellhop returned for a final time, glancing between them, aware now of the emotional landscape unfurling. He asked again, but this time with a deeper understanding in his eyes. David paused, the weight reflective in his gaze. "No, thank you." "We're good," he said with newfound ease, a smile breaking through his uncertainty. With the bellhop nodding and stepping away, David turned back to Sarah, the previous tension ebbing away. "You're right," he said softly. "I don't want to be just a title." "Then let's start that journey now," she encouraged, the warmth between them palpable, weaving a bond stronger than before. As they left the hotel hand in hand, a sense of freedom washed over them. The weight of expectations fell away, leaving space for growth and connection. No longer defined by labels or roles, they were simply Sarah and David, ready to navigate the complexities of life together. The world outside felt lighter and the path ahead shimmered with possibility. They no longer needed to wear masks, but instead embraced their imperfections and the beauty of being authentically themselves together. The moment Sarah stepped into the Grand Marist Hotel, she felt the air shift around her. The opulence struck her with force. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like dripping jewels, and the polished marble floor gleamed with reflections of elegant guests milling about. But beneath the beautiful facade lay a tension she couldn't ignore. She had been waiting for this day, waiting to confront David about the request he had made. Their last conversation had left her unsettled. When he had asked her to join him on a venture that danced on the brink of unethical, she had hesitated, and the hesitation brewed into an internal storm. As she headed toward the bar, she spotted David, casually leaning against a beautifully crafted wooden structure, a cocktail in hand and an easy smile stretching across his face. He looked every bit the part of someone who belonged here, a man wrapped in money and ambition. But the more she approached, the faster her heartbeat raced. He called, eyes shining with excitement. As she neared him, the smile faltered slightly and uncertainty flickered across his handsome features. She took a breath, the weight of their upcoming conversation daunting. He led her to a quieter corner away from the hubbub of joy and laughter. As they settled down, the ambience shifted, thickening with unspoken words. "David," she began, the nerves twisting inside her. "Sarah, this is an opportunity." He leaned forward, intensity sparkling in his eyes. "I get that, but it's too risky." She clenched her fists lightly, searching his gaze for understanding. "Wrong, come on, think about it, we could be living our dream." He gestured wildly, frustration simmering just beneath the surface. "It's not just about escaping my job, I don't want to compromise my values," she countered, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. He paused as if the words stung him. "Why can't you see the potential?" she replied, taken aback. Just then a bellhop sauntered past, impeccably dressed in a crisp uniform, a shiny tray balanced expertly in his hands. He paused, his eyes fixing on David. "Good evening, sir," he said, the word "sir" echoing through the air like a declaration. In that instant, Sarah felt a strange jolt, as though the air had been knocked from her lungs. David straightened, the title wrapping around him like a cloak, transforming him right before her eyes. As the bellhop departed, she gasped quietly, trying to process the change in him. She blurted out, "Being called sir." He blinked, surprised by her outburst. "What does it matter? It's just a title," he dismissed, but his posture suggested otherwise. She insisted, a fierce urgency in her voice. "You're becoming someone I don't recognize." David narrowed his eyes, frustration flaring. "You think I'm playing a game? Standing in the way, so what, I should just go along with whatever you want?" The heat surged in her chest, emboldening her. The bellhop re-entered the scene, tray in hand again, visibly taken aback by the tension crackling between them. He asked David, oblivious to the emotional storm brewing. Once the bellhop walked away, Sarah felt a rush of anger. "Do you even hear yourself, the way you command others while I'm left feeling like a ghost?" He shot back, voice sharp. Her heart raced, desperation creeping into her voice. David leaned back, exhaling sharply as if letting go of a heavy load. Sarah pressed, trying to understand. "You've never had to earn your place to fight for everything you have," he replied, his eyes narrowing. "Then prove to me that you're more than what you show. Right now I see someone using a title to mask their insecurities," she said, feeling tears well in her eyes. At that moment the air between them shifted, thick with unspoken fears. David's expression softened slightly as he processed her words. He murmured, the vulnerability sneaking into his voice. "Then let's find out," she urged, determination firm in her voice. "But you have to let me in." He looked away, contemplating her request, the tension rising as the truth hung in the air like fog. "What if I fail, Sarah?" she countered, her heart racing, her voice steady but full of emotion. He finally asked, searching her eyes for an answer. "More than anything," she replied, the air around them crackling with tension. "But I can't do it alone." Just then the bellhop approached once more, standing uncomfortably by their table. He asked, his gaze darting between them, sensing the emotional tug-of-war. David glanced at the bellhop, then back at Sarah. She sensed a tide turning, a choice hanging in the balance. He hesitated, the words caught in his throat. "Please," Sarah urged, her heart pounding. And in that moment she saw it. The flicker of fear changed to something more profound. David's walls began to crack. "I don't want to hide anymore," he confessed, voice wavering. "Then let's start now," she said, feeling hope spark within her. But as he nodded, ready to break free from the weight of his title, that same bellhop tapped lightly on the back of David's shoulder. "Excuse me, sir," he said again. Before David could respond, the bellhop stepped away, leaving a sense of anticipation hanging in the air. It felt as if the moment was slipping away, the clarity threatened by the return of titles and expectations. David looked at her, a mix of determination and confusion in his eyes. "I need to make a decision." "Then let's make that decision together," she insisted, longing to hold on to the fragile bond they had created just moments before. He opened his mouth to agree, but the crowd around them shifted, laughter echoing as more guests arrived. Sarah felt her heart race, the moment spiraling out of their control. Suddenly, David's expression darkened, a storm brewing in his gaze as he met her eyes. "I can't do this now," he said, voice tightening. Sarah felt a gulp of panic as the tension shifted again, pulling them apart. "I'm saying," the words hung heavy on the air as he glanced toward the crowd, unsure of himself. "Don't you dare retreat," she exclaimed, her voice rising, heart pounding with urgency. The moment felt stretched, fragile and precarious as glowing chandeliers flickered like faint stars overhead. It was the turning point, the fracture between what could be and what was starting to slip away. As David took a step back, his face a mask of conflict, she realized they were standing on the brink of a decision that could change everything. The path ahead loomed uncertain, a shadow stretching out before them. "David," she said softly, desperation seeping into her voice as she reached for him. But before he could respond, the bellhop returned, this time standing next to David, holding a small envelope. "Sir, this just arrived for you," he announced, holding the envelope out with the same casual strength he had shown all night. And as David took the envelope, Sarah's heart stopped. In that fleeting moment, she realized the stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. David's eyes turned to her, a whirlwind of uncertainty swirling within. "I think I need to read this," he said quietly, the connection between them teetering on a knife's edge. And with that, the moment stretched, heavy with anticipation. As he opened the envelope, Sarah held her breath, knowing whatever happened next could change everything. Would he finally choose the path toward honesty, or would he let his fears win, leaving them both standing in the shattering silence?